This is Find Your Magic, where we interview people who have found their gifts and the courage to live into them. I'm Tracy Feldstein, wellness and body engineer and owner of Hello Mellow Natural Skincare.
And I'm Jaime Gennaro, consultant and business coach. And in today's episode, we interview Abi Barella, owner of Sparkle and Shine Guidance. Abby's an astrologist, a coach, a healer, and an intuitive guide. And to learn more about her, you can click the link below.
And if you like what you see in this series, consider joining us at our in-person event, the Summit. It's Find Your Magic this year, and it's on January 8th, 2022 in Ojai, California, where we help people like you find their gifts and live into them.
Help more people find this content by liking and subscribing. Now let's get into the interview. Yeah, thanks for getting up early, Abi.
Yeah. So tell me about this project.
So we're doing, started for this in-person retreat that we're doing in January. And we thought, well, what's a good way to kind of get people excited about this in-person retreat, which is basically about people tapping into their gifts. So really getting in touch with what's the thing they want to do next and like, how do they get courage to pursue it? And so we want to workshop that with people and just be in person for the first time in a long time. And so when we were thinking about that, like what kind of content could we do? We were like, well, let's get in touch with people who have done it, who can be inspiring to people who are on this journey of like, I don't even know how to find it, first of all. And then once I find it, what do I do with it?
Yeah.
So of course I thought about you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, cool. So let's jump in if you feel ready. Okay. Well, Tracy, do you want to jump in and ask the
now
first
I
question?
Just want to know, is that what you do? Is the what is your magic? Tell me, Abigail.
Yeah. What was that saying?
I said, what do you do? And is it your magic? What is your magic?
Yeah. So I was doing that. So I did doula work for a long time, for about a decade. And just then moved into doing more childbirth ed with, my own growing children. But what I realized was like, I was really fatiguing myself out, doing a lot of things that were exactly my zone of genius. Like, it was like, I'm sure Jamie in that moment felt like I was good at that.
Yes.
Not to say that wasn't my thing, but in terms of like what I realized was like, wow, I'm using like, I kind of shy away from using the term shaman just because it's, in the West, I just feel like there's so much appropriation with so many things. But for me personally, I felt like I was using my healing and my shaman powers for something that somebody could really do without having those, if that makes sense. So it's like, I was shying away from doing the kind of like focusing on the thing that really made me good at that. And I think that, my teacher, in terms of like the energy work, my teacher always said, anybody who's just really good at what they do is psychic, right? They're like using these extrasensory powers to be good at what they do. But for me, there was a huge block in terms of like really shining in what I was gonna do, because there's so much, and like, it's such a different world we're in now. But for me back then, and I'm sure some people still now have a lot of blocks or beliefs or conditioning built up around using maybe extrasensory gifts or calling themselves psychic, or there's just a lot that I see this kind of phase that we're in clearing out a lot of that for people. So like, now everyone and their mother is like, doing energy type coaching, which is great. I mean, we need more of it. I really feel like this there's a reason why. And some people are like, oh, well, it's just so saturated. It's like, it's really not when you think about the grand scheme of, corporate America and how like everybody needs a healer and we need to heal ourselves. So if you're born with an oracle heart, most likely you're supposed to turn it in for your own healing. So I feel like for me, it was really about owning who I am, and breaking through that in order to really kind of be in my zone of genius, so to speak. And, a big part of that was my mother's passing in 2013. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And in 2013 was also the time where my teacher says, like, I hit the ground running with my psychic gifts. And so it was like the convergence of these two things. I'm getting chills. The convergence of these two things where it was like, no, I can't do this. And then it was like, well, I'm going to die. And then it was like, oh, this is temporary. Okay. Like, so maybe I can do this. Like, maybe this is what I'm here to do. And then it was like being the healer for her to gather all of her power to go out of this, this realm with, was really like my initiation into like, if you can hold space at the foot of your mother's bed for her to like hone her power, then you can probably do it for a lot of people. So that was like a huge piece of it. And of course she, like, even on her deathbed was like, because at that time I was still in the birth world, and she was like, the men just won't understand you. Like, it's not going to be very safe for you, like, and it was like that hero's journey of like, even one of the most supportive people on the planet being like, you still probably shouldn't do this thing that you're really good at, and like having to really like gather my own courage and stand up. And I feel like that's a huge part of this process is you're going to be questioned. The more resistance we have, the more, you're going to be questioned in whatever path is truly your path, because that's part of like the hero's journey, right? That was a lot. So
it's so good. It's so
I love
good.
it. It's so great. That's
So
exactly what we're talking about.
So you knew, like, when you were doing the doula work that you were tapping into something, but that felt like sort of I don't want to say easy path, but like it felt like a possible way to use your gifts. But then how did you, like, when you were working with your mom, how did you sort of like shift some of those gifts into an offering to people? Like, how did you make that switch into like, okay, I'm going from this world into now I want to figure out a new way to talk about it? Because I know some of the work that you do now, and I don't hear you using all of that kind of vocabulary. So I'm just curious, like, where do you use some of that vocabulary? Where do you feel afraid to use some of that vocabulary? And like, how do you shift it into like an offering for people?
And like what vocabulary specifics?
So psychic gifts and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And healing. I mean, maybe healing wasn't part of your vocabulary in the beginning, and then it became part of your vocabulary.
Right. And for sure, there are certain catchwords that I do shy away from. And and so that's why I was wondering what vocabulary, because I want to attract people who aren't looking for me to read their ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago's energy fields. So I don't use the term psychic, because we have a lot of built-in programming around what that looks like, right? And then in terms of healing, I also shy away from, because I want to attract people who are, not that we all need healing, but that aren't so stuck in their needing a healer that they're not embodying the shift that I feel necessary to speak to them at, if that makes sense.
What is that?
What is the place where I want to speak to them at?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I want them to be at the point where they've already confronted where they need to be the hero and they're like ready for it, or they are like, there's an energy it's really difficult to put into words, but there's an energy. And I guess it would be like, so also to just go over, like, I trained with my teacher who is an intuitive counselor. So she's a reverend. And I also like played with that in the beginning and ultimately kind of veered away from that term as well, reverend, even though now I'm like, I could see doing that now, but like, so I'll say like, she gave me a lot of the formatting and the ways in navigating. And for me, it's like, if you're a doula, hopefully you know how to hold sacred space. Like, that's the biggest thing about being a doula, is like, you hold sacred space. So for me, I just translated that into an hour session. Okay, we're going to dive in. So that means I can't let people, go off on their long tangent about whatever. Like, I'm going to have to like cut some people off, and we're going to have to get to the birth, right? Because like, we're going to have to go through transition. We're going to have to like get to a birth by the end of it for me to feel good and charging what I'm charging, for me to feel good and holding that space for them. So that was a lot, but I feel like that it's not by chance that I did that work first. And I still hold that work so dear to my heart. And I feel like every birth that I was at probably needed some kind of like, either we had, karmic ties, or there was a need for a shaman to be there. So I actually did have to, I've been in situations where I shouldn't have had to do the things that I did, but I was there for a reason. So, babies that weren't breathing right away and the midwife freezes, and, different things where you're just like, is this really happening? So I think there's no chance in the journey that got me to where I am. And for everyone, like, I think that there's those moments where they define you. And if you can look back and see like what pieces of that play into your future, you're gonna go so much further than those of us who can't, or if you don't value your own experience, your own lived experience. Like I meet so many people who are like, I don't know if my trauma is deep enough. And I'm like, okay, like you really, like there's some work there around like the beliefs around like, yeah, just like valuing everyone's own journey and experience on this planet. So
yeah.
mm-hmm.
So what are the words that you use to attract people? What are the words that you use to attract who you want?
Yeah. So a lot of soul, soul shine, soul guidance, self-actualization. Cause I mean, sorry, I also have a degree in psychology. So one of my biggest things when I was getting that degree was like being able to really dive into like Jung's work and really dive into Maslow's work. And to me, he was so much bigger than the psychology realm would give him space for. But he really believed like his passion was when the people making the most money on the planet are the ones helping others reach self-actualization, that's when the whole paradigm shifts. Like that's the shift on the planet. And like that's, I believe he was speaking to the quote unquote new earth that, kind of like there's certain fringe communities that talk about. And I feel like he was speaking to that. And just knowing that we needed more people in their power to shift the dynamic on the planet at that time, and still, right? Like people still struggle with standing in their power, owning their space, taking up space. So yeah.
And so when you figured that out for yourself, right, what was the shift from like being a doula and what that felt like in you, and then finding this kind of, where we're calling it like magic space? Like what was the energetic shift? What was the shift within you that got you to realize that this one was your gift and this was something you were good at?
So there's a lot of like physically efforting as a doula, and again, like I said, like there's people that is their magic, that is their zone of genius. There's people who are woodworkers who are lugging heavy things, and that's their work. But for me, the amount of not only physical taxing but also emotionally taxing, like it's crazy to me now. How I know I'm in my zone of genius now is that like I get fired, like I get energized from, and this would happen in the birth world as well. So I'm not saying that wasn't part of it, but I get completely fueled up from doing my work, right? So it's like this symbiosis. And it's not to say that we still don't need breaks. It's not to say that we still don't need ways to find that on our own. But for me, it's like the fueling, like I'm fueling people. I see them changing. I see their ways of navigating the world change. And then for me, I learn something from each person I work with. And so it's like this ever growing thing. Like it's just exponential. So I think that there's this expansion feeling that I get from doing it that feels like it's engaging enough of me to keep learning. Because there was a point when I was doing the other work where I was like, I say this every day. I say the same things every day. And in my work now, it's like there are certain themes where I've like made courses because I'm like, okay, just take this course. But the majority of my work is so unique and so different that it really is engaging. And for me, that was a big piece of it. And I think everybody's different. But for me, it's like continuing to engage my brain in new pathways and new ways of like, someone presents with something totally different every time. So it's like kind of a puzzle, and that's really fun for me. So yeah.
Cool.
And what about the part, which is always interesting to me, of like turning it into a job, right? Because we have these gifts and it might be really easy to like use our friends or use our life experience as sort of, to make the connection of like, okay, I have this gift. It clearly like showed itself for the first time in this situation, like with you and your mom. And then what's that shift of like, now I'm going to ask for money for this gift?
Yeah. And Jamie, I've worked on this, like, so like, it's an ever evolving thing that is like, okay, now, when I first started, I think I was charging like $60 or something, like, and feeling so insecure about it. Like, oh my God, like, am I really going to charge them? And I think that part of it is what is super exciting, like, at the time. And so at that time, it was like building my confidence, and there was still struggle. And, again, any field you're in, you're going to kind of, for most of us, especially women, deal with like worthiness or value. But it's different when you're in like an engineer field where you all make this amount of money, right? But when you're starting your own business, it's like, well, is this okay? Or certain people like feeling like, you're really charging that, like, and so I think that it's always a work in progress. But ultimately, I think that the thing is like what excites me. And if I was getting paid, $60 now, I would show up like not super in my body and not super excited, because I know how far in terms of like the bills, my overhead, all the things that I need to pay, so it's like, I just feel like there's a level of, we take it too seriously, like the what we're going to charge and how we're going to charge our worth. And I think that if it can be more of a play, like, does this excite you? And if it excites you, then I don't know if that's the what you were asking, but but like kind of just having more play around it and knowing that it's constantly evolving. So in terms of like going from making it work, it just was so obvious to me. And I see this so often in the work that I'm in, and especially with women, is that they're willing to give so much to so many people. And then when it comes in terms of like charging for it, it triggers all of these things. And I think that that's really to show us our shadow around the feminine. And that's the healing work on the planet right now. So yeah, I don't know if any of that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it does 100%. I mean, I think, as we mentioned, what we want to do here is help inspire people who have maybe realized, I have this thing and now I don't know what to do with it. Like, and
Yeah.
that journey, I think, of understanding how you can share it and what that means. And it doesn't always mean for money, but there's a moment where it's really nice to feel like our work, our worth, our thing that we do, and the way that we serve people, like that it is okay to ask for money for that thing, and that we can connect it to this thing that is our gift, and like make that the full fluid thing, so that, like you said, we feel fueled, we feel energetic, and we feel excited about the work we're doing, instead of like, oh, I show up for my job over here from 9 to 5.
Right.
I feel really unhappy, although I'm like getting the money I think I need, but then I have this whole power over here that I'm not even tapping into or using or serving people in the
Or
way
don't
that
have
could,
yeah,
yeah.
or don't have the energy to fully explore. So you're actually a disservice to the community, right? It's that whole idea. So one of the tools that I use within this context, as you know, Jamie, is astrology. And there's a point in the chart, it's called the part of fortune. And in our Western mind, most people are like, ooh, like the pot of gold, It's like, well, for me, it's like, what if we thought of your fortune is the fortune you give back in service to the community? So in ancient times, they'd look at that and they'd kind of figure out where this baby being is going to be most helpful to giving back to the community. And there's a balance there, but feel like the big fracture that we're mending right now is that pot of gold or that part of fortune. It's not like in a Bill Gates, like all for me billionaire thing. And that's where people go when they think about charging their worth. It's in how can I energetically show up held and supported so that I can serve the community, right? So I just feel like there's a big fracture I do feel like it's being healed right now, but it is work for people, right? To step into that.
Yeah. For sure.
It's
And
an
what's amazing too is like you both helped me personally with that. Like Abby, you did a lot of coaching with me early on before I even knew what coaching was. Like that, I was hiring you to do readings for me, and you were ultimately like doing a reading and getting some signals from it, but then coaching me and helping me get over my blocks and going towards something. Because I was so stuck in my old job. I had no idea even where I was going or how I could serve. And you helped crack that open. And then Tracy's helped me just like take it the step further of like, okay, now we've recognized what the thing is. How are you going to like maximize it now? Which is just like, it's an amazing journey when you get on it. It's so freaking scary. But once you like figure it out, it's just like all you can do is go up.
Right. There's no other way. Right. And I think that you're highlighting an important thing too, because Jamie, you've helped me too with the money stuff and like working through some of my blocks with the money stuff. And to remember, like, we're not meant to do it alone. And then so many people have such weird things about like investing in themselves. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why I use certain terminology is like, it's not, even though, yes, like you can't say it's really not about the money, but it's about the energy behind the money and how much you're willing to invest in yourself and build like a team to help you. Cause like you were asking me, like, I wouldn't have been able to do, if I didn't have my teacher that I studied with for a year, like I wouldn't have been able to stand as strong as I did. I would have stood, but it wouldn't have been as fortified. So I just want to remind people too, like, it's not done in isolation. None of this work is done in isolation. So it's just an important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's honestly why we came up with this idea of the summit and the retreat is like, we both, and it sounds like you too, believe that like the light, right? The more energy that you have, the more support, the more you can see your reflection in others feeling the same way, doing the same work, taking the leap, believing in themselves and believing in, putting good energy out and getting good energy back and matching all of that. Like, that's what it's about. It's like, I feel like a lot of people that have these extra gifts, it's like you hide them.
Yeah, right. You
They
learn
grow
really.
in you, but you hide them and you feel
Mhm.
like the weirdo, and like it's scary to take the leap and all that stuff. And like, so we're trying to really demystify that and actually pull that out in everyone and make it brighter and brighter and brighter by like, the more you can see the reflection, the more you can hear people like you and see how we all need the support, right? I need Jamie to be like, hey, look at yourself, look at that. And I was like, whoa, okay, I never saw that, right? And it's like, it makes you, soar. It really helps you get support to take all the leaps and believe in yourself. And yeah, we need each other so that we can be our best selves. That's so cool.
Yeah. And so the last question for you, Abby, now that you've kind of gone through this journey and you've gotten to the place where you are, Do you feel like you're in your full magic? Do you feel like you're able to share all the gifts? Or are you still holding something back?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think to be completely honest, like the way I believe is like there's always something more that we're unpacking or unfolding. I don't personally believe that we ever, unless we're like at the end of life, that we're like ever like, oh, I feel complete, like I think I've done it all, or feeling like complete. I think there's always this like, ooh, what would that be like? Ooh, what would that be like? So I think it's healthy to not feel like I know all the levels of my magic. And really quickly I'll just go into like, before I lived in this home, I was on 30 acres surrounded by woods. And I just the other day was camping out that way. And Spirit and like Source was like, yes, you left a lot of your magic out there. You're going to need to call that back in. So it's like, there's always life happens to us. Right. And so it's like, these little pings or these little signs that like, we're spreading ourselves thin, or like certain experiences happen where like I think I felt so at home in those woods where I was like, oh yeah, I'll just leave some of my like fairy essence out here. So it's like I just feel like that's really not the question you asked, but it kind of is, in that it's an ever evolving process, right? The more you're aware of your magic, the more you're like, wow, there's probably like so much more. So right now I feel like in Cancer season, I'm always like more aware of my intuitive gifts. And yet at that same time, because I'm aware of that, I'm always like, what else? Can I like pull this rock through something? Like I'm always like, what, there's more, I think there's more, So yes and no. I feel like I'm in my magic. Yes, 100%. And there's so much more. Right.
Yeah. And that sounds like you're in your magic. That's part of your magic.
Right. Right. Is honoring the magic, but there's always more. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Amazing.
it's so great. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were open and willing to do this. It's amazing to connect with you, as I knew it would be. And I think you're very inspiring. You've always inspired me, even when you were a doula. I was like, how is she doing this for a living? How is she turning these amazing, gifts, and also like her personal passion? How is she turning this into self-employment? I've watched your journey from then and always just wished I could have something similar. So thanks for being inspiring, then. And you were definitely karmically attached to me. You needed to be at my birth. I don't think I would have made it without you, honestly.
Of course you would have.
Wow. But I needed you there. It just was, I even though it was so difficult, it was 3 days of labor, Tracy, essentially. But you made me feel like I could do it. You helped me feel powerful. And I don't remember being scared at all. I remember feeling like I had an amazing support system between you and Lorenzo, my midwife. And it just like, I have the best memories, even though I was in pain.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to be here too.
So nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's so nice
I
to meet
hope
you.
we all get together at some point.
Let's do it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted about the summit too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
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 Yeah.
So she talked about being a psychic, but that's not what she talks about as her offering to people. But also she has a psychology degree, which I didn't know about.
Yeah. So
she doesn't like to use that to legitimize herself.
She doesn't use that word. And she never used the word psychic, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe hidden, maybe some things are hidden. It sounds like she has reasons why, because she doesn't want to attract the wrong people. But so fascinating, right? To like, do you have to hide it, or do you have to stand in it, or is she standing in it in a different way? I have so many more questions now.
I know. It's
There might be a follow-up.
Yeah, because I just wrote like 5 things down. I wrote psychic, healing, ready to be the hero, psychology, and energized.
Yes.
So it's interesting, the like ready to be the hero piece also, because that was part of her journey, was like, oh, and then I realized I was on this hero's journey. But what's interesting about the hero's journey is you don't know you're on the hero's journey.
Yeah.
There are like
Yeah.
certain steps that happen, but it's like as you're going through it, you have no idea that you're just in the middle of like about to like crack something open, right?
Yeah. Right. But that's what she's looking for in a person, which I get energetically. Like
Yeah.
you're looking for someone who's right there and ready. Right.
Yeah.
That's like more close to cracking than having no idea. Right. So
Yeah.
they're pulled to that point, and then you're going to help them through it. Right. Or
Yeah.
help crack open or grab a hand. Right. To support the change.
Yeah.
Really
Because I
fascinating.
think that's really interesting too, like for all of us that are in this type of work. And I think, I mean, I don't know about your people, but I think most of the people that we're going to talk to that I asked to do this are looking, you know, are in the service industry, essentially looking for people to support on that path. And I think it's interesting to like, that would be an interesting thing to ask. Like, how do you know when people are ready to work with you?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Right. And she's right. It's like hard to put it into words. It's like you kind of just know, but how do you know when you meet the person, but how do you let them know that they're ready also?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's when the money comes in, because there's a commitment.
Yeah.
So that's when someone says yes. Right. And so I think that's where the money has energy, is like
Yeah.
it's truly about, I'm committing and investing in myself. I believe it's time for this. Right. And that's what proves it. And it's like so funny, because as this person, it's like that weird where she was saying like, oh no, there's that, and then there's that money thing, and we all feel uncomfortable asking, but it's like it's just an energetic thing, right? Where it's like, I'm going to tell you this is my value, and then you're going to say, yes, I'm in, because I want to match that. Right? Like I
Yeah.
want that for me. I believe in that value for myself, that's going to bring more value to me, and I'm committed. Let's go. Right?
Yeah.
That's my belief on it.
Thank you for watching. This is Find Your Magic.
And don't forget to share with your friends, and like and comment and subscribe, so we can find more magic and make more magic together.